Welcome to the next installment of the Miami Group Sierra Club Virtual Backpack Series.
Let me begin by introducing your presenters for this webinar. My name is Nancy Ball, and I've been camping and hiking for a very long time and backpacking and leading trips since 2005. This past year, I launched a new business planning and leading trips, and it's called Summit Trek and Travel. And Barry Randall will also be presenting. Barry?
Hi, my name is Barry Randall. Welcome, everyone. I also have been doing some camping, hiking, and quite a bit of backpacking for more years than I care to remember. Currently, I'm the outings chairperson for the Miami Group Sierra Club, and that just means that I've got a team of people that help us plan outings like backpacking for all different skill levels. So again, welcome, everyone.
And we're missing Denise tonight. She normally joins us for these as well, but you'll hear from her on her next webinar. So we're going to move ahead. Before we dig into this week's topic, those of you, hopefully all of you, were able to do the homework. Anyone who was on last week's webinar should have gotten this homework assignment to follow these directions that are listed on here. And if you did, and you did them accurately, your shapes that you noted, you're going to either take a picture or sketch them out, should match what you see on the screen here. So it'll help us have an idea of how well we did presenting information last week, if you can tell us how well you did on the homework. So Barry just launched a poll there for us, and if you could answer, ooh, I see somebody got all 4, that's awesome. So everyone who did the homework, if you could just indicate for us how many of the shapes you were able to match up. And again, the first one's a triangle, in case you can't see them right now. The second one is a square. The third one is the letter M. And the fourth one is 2 boxes joined at in the corners. Now I see got a few people. And I'm happy to see that people were getting some of them right at least. I don't know how many people on this call actually were on last week or were able to do the homework. I'm going to give you just a couple more seconds in case there's a few more people.
Well, it looks like we had at least 7. That's pretty good.
Yeah. And I'm really happy nobody said, uh-oh, back to the drawing board.
Yeah.
So that's a good thing. That's a good thing. I'm going to go ahead and end that, and I think I can share the results with y'all so everybody can see. So not bad, not bad. Okay.
Yep. Okay.
Let's see. Okay, let me just keep us moving right along. So tonight we're going to learn how to put the compass and the map together in order to navigate in the field. And I think it's a good idea for us to start off with just a really quick review of the basic parts of the compass, because we'll be referring to these. First of all, we got the base plate, which is just the clear plastic base of the triangle. Then we have the direction of travel arrow on this compass. This arrow right here, it might look different on your compass. Some of them have a triangular arrow back here at the back of the base, or maybe a smaller arrow here. But in any case, it's going to be an arrow that's pointing in the direction that you're going to want to travel, hence its name. The next thing is the compass housing, which is this wheel, which rotates. And then orienting arrow, the orienting arrow is this block right here through the center of the compass housing, and the orienting lines or orienting marks, which are these lines here. Those are in place to help you line up with north. The compass needle is this thing right here, and notice this end is red. The red end of the needle is always the end that points north. Excuse me. And then this mark is the index pointer, and that's simply the place where you read the bearing once your compass is set for a particular heading. So we'll be using that terminology as we go through this. So we're going to just jump right into it right away. I'm going to have you use your compass with the map that we gave you. Hopefully you've all had a chance to download it and print it. So the first thing you want to do is spread that map out in front of you. And I'm going to tell you that the section of the map, it printed out in 4 pages. The section of the map that you want to look at is actually the upper left, or I'll say the northwest quadrant. I think it printed out as page 2 on the PDF that you would have downloaded. that's the section of the map that you want. So spread it out someplace flat where you can get to it. And then the second thing you want to do, and you'll have to look at the other pieces of the map that you printed out for this, is determine for sure which way is north. Some maps have meridian lines which run north-south. Excuse me. This one does not have meridian lines, but at the very bottom of the map, there is a compass rosette. And from that, we can see that north is pointing towards the top of the page, the top of the map. So once you know those two things, what we're going to do now is we're going to find 2 points on this map. The first one is called the Forest Service Gate, and the second one is called Tritt Knob. So the Forest Service Gate you're going to find in the top third, it's about a third of the way down on the page and over toward the right-hand side. You're looking for the parking lot at Forest Service Gate. So a bright red P will be a clue for you. And then just about due south from there, you're going to find another parking lot that is at Tritt Knob. So those are the 2 points on the map that you want to find. What we're going to do next, and Barry's going to demonstrate this for you in a minute, but try to follow along with me. What you're going to do next, this is really step 1 of the process now, is align the edge of your compass base plate with the starting and finishing points on your map. So you want to lay your compass down on the map so that those 2 points we just found, the 2 parking lots, are aligned along one edge of the compass. And while you're doing that, make sure that you're putting the compass down on your map so that you're pointing in the direction of travel. So make sure the direction of travel arrow is pointing from the Forest Service Gate to Tritt Knob. The next step then, excuse me, is to hold the map or hold the compass still on the map so that those 2 points are along one edge of the base plate, and then rotate the compass housing until those the orienting arrow and the orienting lines are pointing north, which you'll remember is at the top of the map is north. Once you've done that, you're going to look at the index pointer on your compass and read the bearing at that point. Okay, we're going to skip step 4 for now. Excuse me. But if you did that accurately, your compass should be pointing generally south, and the bearing that you have should be around 180 degrees if you did that accurately. So I went through that quickly, but now Barry's going to do it again, and you'll be able to watch him. A little bit of practice time. I'm going to stop sharing my screen so that we can see. This is where you want to put your view on speaker view, by the way, so that you can see a larger image of Barry doing this on the map. Yep. Go ahead, Barry.
Okay. Thanks, Nancy. So hopefully folks can now see the map here. And as Nancy was explaining, we're using this northwest quadrant. It's got the Bear Creek Lake up in the corner here. And here's our Forest Service Gate here. And then Tritt Knob is down here. We're trying to get a bearing between those two. So I'm going to take my compass and notice my direction of travel on this compass is down at this end. So I'm going to make sure that's pointing roughly in the direction that I'm going to want to be going. And I'm going to line the edge of it with Forest Service Gate right there. And my compass isn't quite long enough to actually reach Tritt Knob, so I'm going to cheat a little bit and use a credit card. Don't steal my credit card information, by the way. Okay, so now I've got my so now I've got my the edge of my compass is lined up between Forest Service Gate and Tritt Knob. Okay, I'm going to hold that still, and then I'm going to rotate the housing or the bezel, right? And I'm going to rotate it so that the index here, which is the red arrow that's on the base of this, is pointing towards the top of the map. Again, there are no meridian lines, so it's kind of have to just kind of guess a little bit here. That looks like it's about right, okay? And if I look at where I ended up here, you can see it's pretty close to 180 degrees, a little shy of 180 degrees, so it's almost directly south, okay?
Okay.
Back to you, Nancy.
Thank you, Barry. Let me pick us back up. It takes just a minute to respond. There we go. All right. Okay. So now we're going to find another one, and we're going to ask you to do this one on your own. Don't panic, because after you try it, then Barry's going to show you, and you can compare your results to his. But looking at that same place on the map, that same quadrant that we were already using, now you're going to look for Flat Falls Creek, which is, it's still in the upper half of the map, but more about the center, left to right. It's close to Goat Knob, if you see that. And then the second point you're looking for is the place where the Duke Power Line crosses the footpath that is just southwest of Hidden Falls. Okay, so if you find Fox Knob and Hidden Falls on the map, which they're going to be down in the lower half of the map, and close to the left side of the green. That green area indicates the boundaries of the National Forest area. And you see a bright orange power line, Duke Power Line is marked. So what you're looking for is the place where the pathway, which is indicated by those red dots, it actually extends just outside the borders of the forest, and becomes a black dash line. So on that black dash line, the place where the Duke Power Line crosses that black dash line, those are the 2 points you're looking for. So where the power line crosses the path and Flat Creek Falls, you're going from Flat Creek Falls toward the Duke Power Line. So find that bearing on your own, and follow the same 3 steps that Barry just showed you. And I'm going to give you like 2 minutes. But what I would like you to do is, once you have found it, please go to that participants panel and raise your hand so that we can see, like, if we need more time, or if you all get it done early and you don't need as much time, it'll help us out. I see a couple hands going up already. You guys are pretty good. Got at least another minute. And again, as you complete it, as you find the bearing, if you would raise your hand using that raise hand function in the participants panel, and we'll have a better idea how everybody's doing. There's some more hands going up. I'll give you another 20, 30 seconds, and then we'll have Barry demonstrate this. For some of you, you may be having trouble with the compass, or you may be having trouble with the Zoom, not able to find the raise your hand function. I'm not sure which, but we'll try to take care of you in just a minute. I see a question from Jim Strands asking if you should orient the map to the magnetic north of your compass. That's actually not necessary. As long as you orient, as long as you put the orienting arrow and orienting lines toward north, you don't have to actually have the map physically aligned with magnetic north. Okay, I think we'll go ahead and I'm going to stop sharing and give Barry a chance to go back to his table again and show you all, demonstrate for you what we were just trying to do. If you had trouble with this and have a specific question, type it in the chat box and we'll try to explain better, okay?
Yep. Okay, great. Thanks, Nancy. So looks like a few of you figured this out, so that's great. So first, the point that we're starting at is this overlook up here at Flat Creek Falls. There's the falls, there's the overlook. Actually a very pretty spot. If you're ever actually down in Panthertown, check it out. And the place that we're trying to find is, here's that power line, and here's the trail. And so we're looking at the intersection point of those two. So we're trying to get from up here to down there. And again, like we did the first time, first thing we're going to do is align the edge of our compass. And I'm going to cheat again, use my card here to give me a little longer edge. Line the edge there, and that looks like it's about at the overlook to the intersection. So then I'm going to hold the compass steady, and then I'm going to turn the housing so that the red arrow box, the shed, which is what we called it last week, is pointing towards the top of the map, which we know is north. Okay. So now the compass housing is oriented to the map itself. And if I look at this direction of travel, it looks like it's just shy of 200 degrees. So it looks like it's maybe 196 or 198, something in that range. So if you were close to that, then I think you did pretty well. Nancy?
Yeah, so Barry, you want to go ahead and show them what you would do with that next?
Oh, okay, great. Thanks for the reminder.
Yeah.
and it kind of ties into, was it Jim who asked that question earlier?
Yeah,
so
I think so,
now we know what our direction of travel is. Now we would rotate ourselves and our compass. I'm just going to rotate the compass because I really can't stand up and still stay in the field of vision. So we're going to rotate the compass, and if I were doing this outside myself, so that the compass needle is now in that outline in the housing. So the phrase we used last week was, we put Fred in the shed. Okay.
Hey Barry, there's a glare I can't see. Is it red Fred in the shed, or is it the other end?
It is. I do have red. So
okay.
Yeah, sorry if it's a little hard to, maybe that's a little better.
Okay.
Hard for me to see both it and the screen.
Oh, now I can see yeah, I can see it better now. There was a glare there.
So this now becomes our direction of travel. You can see the arrow, and so we would be walking that way. Okay. To the earlier question, it certainly wouldn't hurt to orient the map to the same direction if we wanted to, just so that we could kind of visually check our surroundings and say, oh, you know, maybe I'm heading towards a knob, or I'm heading away from a creek or something like that. It could help us kind of get our bearings if in fact our map and our compass and ourselves are all kind of oriented the same way. To Nancy's point, it's not necessary to find the direction of travel, but it can be handy when you're actually starting out. So,
but Barry brings up a really good point there. So not only looking around at your surroundings, but also in both of these cases, your heading ended up being almost south. Now, it's pretty easy in this case to look at the map and say, does this make sense? If I just look at the map, can I tell that, what was the first one? Tritt Knob is approximately south of Forest Service Gate? Yes, you can tell that it is. And the same is true for the other 2 points that we just found. You can tell that it's generally south, not perfectly south, but generally south. So if you got a heading that was 3 something, you would know right away that you had something off. Probably you did something like what I've done and put the compass down upside down and had the direction of travel going in the opposite direction the way I wanted to go. So let me switch back over to our slides here. Takes just a minute, I apologize. Oops. It's a multi-step process, and everything wants to go slow. So never going to be as good as doing this in person for so many reasons. Here we go. All right, so now we'll move ahead to the next slide. Okay, so a few really important things to keep in mind as you're doing this. In order to stay on the heading that you shot, you have to make sure the compass stays oriented to north as you walk, and you have to keep walking in the direction of travel. So be careful if you set the compass down that you don't pick it back up and accidentally flip it around backwards and have the arrow pointing at your stomach instead of straight ahead. More than one person has made the mistake of pointing the direction of travel at themselves instead of away from themselves, and then they ended up walking in exactly the opposite direction that they wanted to go. The other thing is that for your heading to be correct, you have to make sure that you know the place where you're starting from on the ground matches the place you're starting from on the map, which sounds pretty basic and obvious, but again, it's a very easy mistake to make, and I've seen people do it. You have to remember what Barry was talking about last week about bending the map. It's easy to see what you believe to be true when you look at the map and see some features to look around you and say, oh yeah, I think that's the same little knob or the same bend in the trail. This is why it's so important to stay found. Another point is that it really isn't practical to stare at your compass the whole time that you're hiking. So instead, you want to choose an object that is in the direction that you're traveling, an object that's on that same heading, and then hike to that object. So you can put the compass back in your pocket till you get to that object, and then shoot another bearing from there. So if you were actually on the ground in Panthertown shooting a bearing from Flat Falls Creek to Hidden Falls, you wouldn't be able to see your destination from the start. So instead, you'd have to find that bearing on your compass, as we just practiced, and hold your compass up to eye level and look in the direction and choose something that's in line that you can head for. And in this case, the further away the object is that you're heading for, the more accurate your route's going to be. But it also has to be in a location you can actually reach on foot. If there's a large ravine or a deep river or a wide lake or anything else like that that's not navigable at that point, then you have to do some additional navigating. So let's talk about that next. So route finding in the backcountry is hardly ever going to be a straight line from point A to point B. So let's look again at that same section of the Panthertown map that we were just using. Let's say you're going to hike from Flat Creek Falls to Hidden Falls. How would you plan a route to get there? Can you go just straight from the starting point to the destination in one straight line? So I've lost my highlighter here. Can you go straight from Flat Creek all the way to Hidden Falls? No, of course not. There are creeks and peaks and a really steep ravine and other things that lie between the 2 points. But in this case, we don't need to bushwhack anyway. The map shows us that there are a series of trails that do connect those 2 points. But if you check the map legend, you're going to see that there are 3 different kinds of trails. So there are, first of all, there are footpaths that are pretty well defined. And then there are also these black dash lines that are Forest Service trails. So that's what the rangers use, the Forest Service uses. And then this one, these little faint or little small dotted red lines, it says it's a footpath, a faint path or a cross-country route. So it's most likely that only the footpaths, the bigger red dots, are going to be really well maintained and well marked. So in order to get from Flat Creek Falls down to, I keep losing the names of them, Hidden Falls, we're going to have to go on a combination of those trails, and it might be a good time to use these map and compass skills. So let's zoom in on that segment a little bit closer. So starting here at Flat Creek Falls, excuse me, you can see one of these small red dotted lines going up to this more major trail. So again, this is one of those faint or cross-country paths. So it may or may not be very easy to follow. So this would be a good place, perhaps, to shoot a bearing on the map from your starting point, which is here at the falls, to the point where this little trail meets up with the bigger, more defined trail at Grassy Gap. So again, you would align your compass plate from your starting point to the ending point, and then turn the housing so that in on your compass, or your compass, orienting arrow is pointing north on your map, and read the bearing. And if you do that, you're going to see that it's pretty close to due west. It's very close to 207 degrees. Excuse me. Now, if you were there, you would stand up, hold the compass in the palm of your hand, and then rotate your body until red Fred is in the shed. And then you would be facing the trail junction that you're heading for. Next thing you need to know, though, is how far away is it? So using the scale on the map, we can see that the distance is less than 1/4 of a mile, really. It's only about 2/10 of a mile. Notice also that the contour lines on here would tell us that we're going up a hill. And it's a pretty steep hill based on how close together those lines are. So Barry talked last week about your watch being a really important navigating tool. Let's say you normally hike about 2 miles per hour. So it shouldn't take you very long to go 1/4 of a mile, right? Except the fact that you're going uphill is going to slow you down some. So I'm just going to say we're going to do some estimating here. We were heading due west, going up this fairly steep hill. We should expect to come across this bigger trail in like somewhere around 8 to 12 minutes, something in that time range. If you don't come to it by then, or you come to it too soon, then something may be off, and that's when you need to start double checking things. Another clue to keeping yourself bound on this is that the path you're aiming for is up and just over this rise. If you all of a sudden find yourself going down a big steep hill, then down a big decline, you've probably gotten off track. Okay, now let's talk about a different example here. Let's see here. Is it going to move? Oh, okay. So one good thing about this trail junction that we just talked about here is that it is going to tee in to the trail that you're looking for. And you're not going to go that awfully far, and you've got these clues of the fact that you're going uphill and over a rise, and you're going to see it fairly soon. It's only 1/4 of a mile. So your odds of hitting this point somewhere in this range right here are pretty good. And where you want to go to get to the place that we're eventually heading is way down here. So wherever you end up here, even if you didn't come out exactly where the trail meets it, say you got off trail because that is a faint trail, you know you're going to turn left and head south. But let's say that instead, we've got a little bit different scenario. Let's say that instead of heading for this point here, you took a detour and decided to climb Goat Knob. So now you're up on Goat Knob, and you want to come down Goat Knob and hit this trail here. In order to get to the place that we're heading, this hidden creek or Hidden Falls, you eventually want to get to this little black dotted trail and take it down below where you can see on the screen right now. So instead of taking Goat Knob over to this direction, it would make more sense to take it down here, since you're going to be bushwhacking either way, right? But since you are bushwhacking, it's very unlikely you're going to be able to travel in a straight line down this hill. There are going to be places where it's too steep. There are going to be things in your way. There's an indication of some kind of a ravine here. You've got all kinds of stuff that you're going to be navigating around. So you're going to be going generally southwest, and you're going to be doing it by navigating in short segments, as we just talked about before, setting a bearing, going as far as you can, moving around obstacles, and getting yourself back on. But each of those segments that you navigate allows for small errors, and they can add up. You're probably, eventually, as you keep heading generally southwest, you're going to hit this trail. But because of what you're going through now, the area where you hit it could be over a wider range. You could be up here, or you could be down here. So if you get to the trail and you can't see this little Forest Service trail from wherever you meet it, how are you going to know whether to turn right or to turn left? That's a problem. But there is a way to compensate for this problem, and it's by overshooting to the right. So instead of aiming for this point when you set your bearing, aim for a point to the right of it. That way, once you make your way down this hill, even with small errors factored in, you're going to land in, you're going to be much more likely to land in an area that's north of the trail that you want, and you'll know that you can take a left and have a much higher chance of getting to it. Okay, let's see, moving right along. Okay, once you reach the more established footpath on your way to the Hidden Falls, you're going to continue to navigate in the same way, following a series of trails and footpaths, and keeping track of where you are on the map. When the trails are clear and easy, you don't need to use your compass to navigate. As Barry discussed last week, again, I'll mention that use time and terrain features to help you keep track. But if you do start to doubt that you're on the right trail or you can't determine for certain where you are, stop and take some time to figure it out. Are you still on a trail? If you hike a little further or backtrack a little bit, will that help you figure out where you are? If you still aren't certain, then backtrack to the last place where you were certain and find yourself on the map again and just start over. Just shoot a bearing and begin anew and try to figure out, look for some of the common mistakes that happen and try to get yourself corrected. So a quick mention of another factor in navigation, excuse me. So you'll remember when we talked last week that we talked about your compass needle is always pointing north, and it's actually not pointing straight at the North Pole. It's pointing to a large magnetic field that's near the North Pole, not precisely there. So this magnetic field is called magnetic north, and that's the direction your compass is pointing. All maps, on the other hand, do point exactly to the North Pole, and this is sometimes called true north or sometimes called grid north or map north. But there's a difference between true north and magnetic north. And because the planet is round, the difference between true north and magnetic north will vary depending on where you are on the planet, and the difference will increase the further north that you go, unless you're in the southern hemisphere, in which case the same thing is true, only upside down. Your compass will be off from the South Pole. So the difference between true north and magnetic north is called declination. And in most cases, the declination isn't significant enough to matter when you're plotting a course. For example, you can see in this little chart here, if the declination is 5 degrees and you follow a magnetic north heading for 10 miles straight, you're going to be off like 4,600 feet. But if you're traveling a mile straight, it's only 460 feet. And the odds of you traveling in a straight mile for a whole mile are not so great when you're out backpacking. So 5 degrees is almost never going to really make a difference, a significant difference when you're backpacking. So you don't need to worry too much about the declination. But you can see the map on the left. This is a map from a section of the Appalachian Trail up in Maine that's pretty far north, and the declination is 17%. So now in this case, the difference over a mile in a straight line would be about 1,400 feet, or more than a quarter of a mile. So there are some cases where that might be important. The further north you are, the more it begins to matter. But learning how to compensate for declination is something that is for a more advanced class than what we're doing now. Just know that if you plan a trip that does require map and compass navigation, and the declination is going to be more than like 10 degrees, you should probably get some additional training on how to compensate, or talk with somebody who knows how to help you with that. You can always contact the Sierra Club or one of us. Barry, before I move on, do you have anything you want to add to that part about declination?
Not about declination. Just in general, since we're kind of wrapping up the compass and map portion, I know we've thrown a lot of information at you, and this is an important skill, but don't want people to feel intimidated by it. It's a matter of matching your skills with the trip that you're trying to take. There's people who hike the entire Appalachian Trail and never pull out their compass. So it's an important skill, but again, it's important to match your trip to the skills and resources you have. If you're bushwhacking out in Rocky Mountain National Park, that's one thing. If you're hiking a well-defined trail somewhere else, obviously you don't need the same level of skill. So don't let any of this intimidate you. But it's a worthwhile skill to develop.
That's a great point. Thanks, Barry. I just want to real quickly hit on a couple things that can, if you keep them in mind, keep you from making a mistake if you are in a position sometime where you are using compass maps to navigate. Let's move on to the next slide here. The first one is remember, stay found. Just make sure that you always know where you're on the map. Just make that a habit, that you always keep track of where you are on the map. Using a compass to find yourself after you've gotten lost is a whole other class. That's not it's not what you're learning in this class is not going to help you do that very effectively. Always make sure the direction of travel arrow is pointing from your starting point towards your destination when you're using it to find a bearing on the map. Again, it's really easy to set it down backwards and end up getting a bearing that will take you in the opposite direction that you meant to go. And the same thing when you're using it in your hand to navigate, to actually cover ground, to travel. Make sure the direction of travel arrow is pointing away from you. Again, it's really easy to flip it around in Friend, or at least it is for some of us. I happen to be a directionally challenged person, and I've done all of these things at least once. The next thing is to make sure that if you're using the compass to travel, if you're following the direction of travel arrow, you have to be sure that the red end of the needle stays in the orienting arrow. Remember, red thread in the shed. If you put the wrong end of the arrow, wrong end of the needle into the orienting arrow, you're going to be heading backwards again. But also, if you're walking along and it's wandering out of the orienting arrow and you don't realize it, you're going to be wandering as well. Which leads to the next point. You really can't walk. You can't keep your eyes on it closely enough while you're walking on a trail for any distance, or if you're bushwhacking especially, you just can't do it, which means that you're going to end up wandering off course. So remember to navigate to a visible point ahead instead of staring at the compass. You really can't stare at your compass and stay in a straight and keep walking in a straight line. And then lastly, remember that total accuracy is just about impossible. If you need to reach a specific spot on the trail, shoot to the right of that spot. In other words, miss it intentionally to the right so that when you reach the trail that you're heading for, you'll know that the target almost always is going to lie to your left. Your odds of finding it will be much greater. And it won't necessarily be a trail that you're shooting for. Any point that you're shooting for that lies along a broad, long point would serve the same purpose. So it could be a creek or a river or a power line or a valley. I'm going to touch real quickly on a couple of leave no trace points, and then we'll wrap up this part of the presentation. Some thoughts in general about bushwhacking. The second leave no trace principle is travel and camp on durable surfaces, and that generally means staying on trails. Bushwhacking causes damage to the terrain and vegetation, and not only that, but people are a lot more likely to get lost if they're traveling off trail. So if you're thinking about bushwhacking, please consider carefully whether what you're about to do is necessary or even a good idea. And there may be times when you can't see the trail clearly. Maybe you're on a snowfield, or there's really foggy conditions, or the trail's going over rocks where there aren't any markings or things like that. And you may feel a need to mark your trail to help you find your way back. It's okay to do that, but again, please make sure you're still following leave no trace principles. And that would mean don't damage any rocks or vegetation in the process, and make sure you remove any signs on your way back. So don't leave any of your cairns or anything like that. Do, however, leave any existing cairns that were already there. Don't take down ones that were put in place before you. And with that, I'm going to pause for a breath and see if we have any questions in the chat box before we move on to this.
We did have one. We had one from Peggy, who was asking if there's any way to tell if your compass is being affected by an outside source. And I typed a quick reply that really the only way is to double check it against another source. If you're traveling with a group, maybe someone else has a compass, so obviously you can compare there. I think it's a good idea to have at least a general understanding of direction relating to both the sun and the stars. So it's good to know where to find the North Star and recognize the North Star, even if that's the only thing you know. And it's also good to understand the basics of the sun and the movement and what that means as far as direction. Last time we talked a little bit about how you could just use a traditional analog watch to determine direction. But just knowing, you know, sun rises in the east, sets in the west, that in the northern hemisphere, it's always going to be in the south at noon. Those basic kind of concepts are important to, it may not give you degree readings, but it helps you from getting things just plain backwards, you know, where you're literally just 180 degrees out of whack. So that's the way I would answer that question. I don't know, Nancy, if you have any other thoughts.
No, sounds right on target to me. Okay. Absolutely.
And I don't see any other questions right now.
Okay, well, we'll move on to
Okay. Okay.
the second part of this.
All right. We're going to do a just really quick introduction to some of the digital resources for navigation. And this will be quick. We could easily spend an entire session just on this topic. And actually, if you're interested in that, let us know. Actually, if you're interested in any topic that we haven't covered, just let us know. We're always looking for new topics to put together stuff on. So this will be just a quick overview. And okay, I think we can go on to the next slide. So first step is in planning your trip. There are a number of web-based tools that are a great resource to plan your trip. And it really doesn't matter if on the trip you're going to be using a handheld GPS or your phone to navigate or a map and compass. These are still good, useful resources to just figure out where you want to go and what trails you want to go on. So I've put a couple out here, Hiking Project and All Trails, and I've pulled a couple of sample trips from Panthertown, which is the map you have. And these are trips that people have taken and they've recorded the route, and they're just out there for anyone to use. You can either use them as is, or you can use them as the starting point to create your own route, either by looking at what they did and then looking at your map and trying to figure out what you want to do, or actually doing more work in the electronic tools to define your own route. You can, if you're going to be using a handheld navigation device of some kind, once you get your route finalized, you can export what they call a GPX file. GPX is just a file extension. It's a fairly standard file format that's just basically a series of GPS coordinates that define a route. So you can export that and import it into other kinds of tools. So if you go to the next slide here. So what I just did here was I took the Panthertown hike from the previous hiking project picture that you just saw, and I've imported it into a tool called Explore. It's one of several or many, like Basecamp, CalTopo, or a couple of other very popular ones. And I can use that now to either just as is, or I can actually manipulate this now. There's a couple other little trails that you can see on that map, and maybe I'd want to take a detour or extend my hike or something. I can manipulate it in here and create my own route. And then if I want to take it to the next step, I can now export that or sync it to a navigation device. Or if I don't want to do that, I could just print out this map, right? Take it with me. Or I could just use this information with my other map to actually navigate on my trip. So you don't necessarily have to use all the electronic tools, but I've found the ones for trip planning are very useful if you're going out to an area that you've never been to and you just want to see what other people have done and get some information on potential trips. Okay. So if you go to the next one. So before we actually talk about using the navigation tools on the trail, a couple of other key points. One is getting to and from the trailhead is pretty important too. And remote trailheads are often in areas that lack cell coverage. So that means your car GPS or your cell phone GPS probably is not going to work. So if you don't know this already, most of these devices and things like Google Maps do allow you to create an offline map. That's basically just taking the map and storing it on your phone. So your phone always has access to the GPS location, so it always knows where it is. What it needs the cell network, though, is to actually show you that map that puts that location in a frame of reference that allows you to actually do something with it. So this little step here that I've illustrated in Google Maps is just a way to store that map on your phone so that even when you lose cell phone coverage, you will still be able to drive and follow that map. And honestly, getting to the trailhead for me is never really much of a problem. Problem comes in when you spend 2 or 3 days out on the trail, you've turned off your phone, you get back to your car, you turn on your phone, and you have no cell coverage. And you're kind of standing there thinking, wow, how did I get here? Did I turn right or left at that gravel road? Unless you have a great memory, and I don't, it's sometimes a little confusing to actually get home. So this is just a great thing to remember to just help you get to and from the trailhead. And the next slide. So this next topic, again, doesn't strictly have to do with navigation, although these days the tools are starting to overlap, but this is about emergency locators. Getting help in an emergency situation in the backcountry takes an extraordinary amount of time. It takes a really long time. If you're curious about that sort of thing, take a wilderness first aid or wilderness first responder course or something like that. But you know, it might take you a day or two to actually get back to some place where you have cell phone coverage, or to get back to a ranger station or something. And then they have to organize and get back out to where the person's injured. So it takes a long time. So if you truly are going out in true backcountry, or just for your own peace of mind, you might want to consider bringing a locator beacon like a Spot or an InReach. Those are two brands. With you. The picture of the helicopter there, that's an actual trip that we were on where one of our participants slipped and broke her thigh. And we were probably 2 days away from any kind of communication or help. So the fact that we had one of these devices was really proved its worth. They use a satellite network. So this is something your cell phone cannot do. So there is no app that'll allow you to send an SOS from your cell phone if you don't have cell coverage. So you really do need one of these other devices, unless you have a satellite phone, which if you have a satellite phone, then you can actually use the phone out in the wilderness. And they are sometimes standalone, and sometimes these days, though, they're combined with a handheld navigation device. So they kind of serve both purposes. Okay. All right. So before we hit the trail with our electronic navigation device, let's take a quick poll and see if there's people think there's any downside to using one of these devices on the trail. So we've got some possible risks here. Just if you want to take the poll and identify any of these that sound like they could be a risk of using an electronic device to navigate on the trail. Okay, we got a couple of people weighing in. Okay.
I think we got almost everybody, Barry. I'll go ahead.
Yeah, I think we do. You can go ahead and close that out. So good job with the answers. Actually, they're all potentially risks. Electronic devices obviously can fail for a variety of reasons, battery or just whatever. It is true that GPS reception can be blocked by hills, mountains, even dense foliage can affect them. Obviously, if you need to keep it charged, that means carrying a battery or something like that, which does add some weight. It is actually true that small errors in the GPS accuracy can mean significant location errors. I can think of 2 instances that I can remember where one, we were up in Linville Gorge, which is in North Carolina. There's a Linville River runs down the gorge, and we were slightly lost as far as gotten off the main trail, and one of the party had a navigation device and was pointing out where we were. Problem was, it was on the wrong side of the river. I mean, just literally the wrong side of the river. There's just no getting around it. He insisted that that's where we were, but I had to keep repeatedly pointing out that if we had crossed a river, I think we all would have noticed it, so it couldn't possibly be right. So it was just off by enough to have us on the wrong side of the river. And there was another case, it was actually a canoe trip where it was a very long and loopy river. And it just so happened that the GPS placed us just a little bit off. By GPS standards, it wasn't far off, but since it cut across a loop in the river, it was 15 miles of river that it cut off. And we had to, again, keep explaining to the person that there was absolutely no way we could have traveled that 15 miles without having noticed it. So it can produce significant location errors with just a small GPS error. And there is this tendency to just follow the GPS blindly. We've all read the stories of people who have, followed their car GPS and driven into a lake or something like that. Well, that same tendency exists in the wilderness. So always, always, always calibrate what the electronic device is telling you with what you're seeing and what your memory is telling you. Okay, I think we can keep going. That said, these are really cool devices in the sense that they do all sorts of incredibly neat stuff. So I don't mean to disparage them. It's just that I always carry a map and compass, even when I'm using one of these. There are many different makes and models, although Garmin seems to dominate the field as far as the standalone dedicated devices, like shown here. Or you can use a cell phone. There are cell phone apps like AllTrails, Gaia, Guthook that perform exactly the same function. And I've never made a study of it, but from what I read and from what I hear, they're probably functionally close, the dedicated device versus the cell phone. However, the dedicated device may have better GPS accuracy and may be better at keeping track of the satellites so you don't lose your GPS connection. And they are reputed to have better battery life. And what the makers tell you is this is simply because it's a dedicated electronic device that's designed to do one thing and do one thing only. Whereas your phone, of course, is a multi-purpose device. So how true that is, I don't know, but those really are the two choices of devices that you have if you want to take something out on the trail. Okay. All right, so now when it comes to navigating on the trail, if you remember, I had that Panthertown Trail and I exported it from Hiking Project and I imported it into Explorer. And then from Explorer, I exported it into both my phone and to this InReach device, actually lent to us by Nancy for a recent trip. But and so you can see that same trail, right, is on the phone there. This particular handheld navigation, this is the InReach Mini. So it doesn't have a screen on it that can show you that map. Most handheld navigation devices, most of Garmin's, do have a screen that's large enough. So you would see that map picture on that orange device. They just made a really tiny one. So it kind of is used in conjunction with your phone. It will, however, give you direction and distance. So it'll tell you which way to go and how far to go. You can see that it's telling me, actually, if you could read that, I have like 344 miles to walk before I get to Panthertown to start this trip. So that's really what it's telling me. It's telling me to start walking there, okay? So, and they're kind of cool. They will give you the direction of travel. And again, if it contains the map, it'll show you your location on the map as you're walking. So it's pretty cool stuff. What they also do that's pretty cool is they'll track your trip. So they not only tell you, here's your planned route. If you turn on tracking, it'll start dropping electronic breadcrumbs as you go, and it'll keep track of you. So they record your actual route, which means you have your distance, you have your speed, you have your elevation change, you have all this data available to you. And along the way, you can drop waypoints, so you can mark campsites that you see or places with water or just a real cool vista or something, you can mark it. And then when you get home, you've got a permanent record of your trip. Okay. All righty. And that kind of wraps up. I know that was quick for the electronic stuff, but obviously you have questions. We can answer them now or at the end.
Yeah. I don't see any questions in the chat box right now. If you think of one and you want to type it in there, go right ahead. Peggy, do you have a question, Peggy? I'll unmute you.
I have to leave. Bye.
Oh, okay. Bye, Peggy. All right. So sorry about that. I thought she was trying to get our attention to ask a question. Since we're at the end of our hour, we're just going to real quickly touch on last things and be able to say goodbye to everybody. Just want you to know that we've got this extra little bonus thing for you all to do for anybody who wants to. As soon as we get out of this PowerPoint slide, I'm going to put a link into the chat box that'll take you to a page on the Miami Group website where you can download one of two maps. One is a map of French Park and the other is a map of California Woods. And along with the map, there's a set of navigation instructions, so a set of bearings and distances, which if you follow them, will lead you to a cool spot. And if you get to the right place, I think you'll all recognize that the cool spot is the cool thing that we're trying to navigate you to, but we're not going to tell you in advance what that thing is. So if you choose to take this challenge, you'll download the map and the instructions and you'll go to the park and you'll follow the coordinates and you will find the cool thing, which is something that's there all the time. We didn't plant anything there, and you'll just take a picture of it. And then we'll have you email that picture to Barry. Oh, there's a blank there for Barry's email, but don't worry about that because it's printed on the maps. And everybody who does that will get one of these really cool Miami Group Sierra Club buffs. So it's a bright orange neck gaiter. It's a lightweight one, so it's good for summer hiking. Anyway, everybody who sends a photo to Barry of the correct destination at one of those two parks will get one of those. And then the other bonus is that the first person, excuse me, to find the correct location at each of those parks will also get this super cool deck of playing cards. Don't get lost out there. So it's a deck of regular playing cards, except that printed on the cards are all these cool tips for staying found when you are out in the backcountry. So we thought that would be a fun way to wrap it up, and maybe a fun way for you to practice the stuff that you just heard this week and last week. So I hope some of you take us up on that. Let's see, we want to know how we did again. So, oh, thank you, Barry. We got one more quick poll for you. If you would, this is just for us to know whether or not our presentation worked, if this helps you with your navigating skills. So if you would kindly complete the poll that should be showing up on your screen right now. And I'm going to mention again that there'll be a PDF copy of the presentation on the Sierra Club website. I'll put a link in the chat box for that. Actually, there was a link in the chat box at the very start of this presentation as well, but I'll put it back in there again. After everyone has a chance to do this last little poll for us, it looks like we're just about finished. Then, hang on a second, I can't multitask very well. We'll also turn all of your microphones on. We'll unmute you all so that if you wish to ask questions, you can ask them out loud. In the meantime, just to wrap us up here, I'm going to say that we think that the outdoors is a great place to be, and if you love it as much as we do, we would love to have you join us for other things, exploring, enjoying, and protecting the planet. And some easy ways to do this are, and you've got the links right here on the screen in front of you. You can become a Sierra Club member. If you like what we're doing, and would like to support it financially, making a donation. You can join our meetup group, which is available to anyone, whether they're a Sierra Club member or not, and join us once we start doing outings in person again. Or become a volunteer and help lead outings and help do things like these presentations. If you are already an experienced outdoors person with skills to share, we'd love to have you join us on the outings committee. So we are actively looking for more outing leaders who have a passion for sharing their experiences with others. So again, right now we're doing it virtually through our webinar series, but someday we will be back on the trails and waterways and paths again. And the outings committee has a lot of fun doing this. So we hope that you will consider joining us. So this presentation, as all the others, has been happily brought to you by Roads, Rivers, and Trails, our local independently owned outfitter in Milford, Ohio, by Summit Truck and Travel, your connection for adventure travel, and by the Miami Group Sierra Club, a part of the largest grassroots environmental movement in the country. And that brings us to the end. I'm going to stop sharing my screen. I will unmute everybody's phone or make it so that you can unmute yourself. You can now unmute yourself if you have a question that you'd like to ask. And while you think about what questions you might have, I'm going to quickly post a couple of links in the chat box for you so that you have access to those things I was just telling you about. So Barry, I'll let you field questions while I put things in the chat box.
Okay. Again, if anyone's got a question, you can still type it in or unmute yourself and ask away. Might have heard it last week, but just as a reminder that for the next couple of months, we're going to be moving to an every other week, actually the first and third Thursday of the month schedule for these presentations. So if you go out to that website, you can see the full calendar. And then we're going to take the month of December off, since that seems to be a conflict for a lot of people. And then we'll be back in January and February with some more topics. So hope you can all keep joining us.
And I just posted the link to the page that has the treasure hunt instructions. And I am also about to post the link for you in the chat box to our schedule of upcoming webinars, the ones that are on the schedule already. And I don't think I see anything more in the chat box.
No.
Okay. So it has been a pleasure. Thank you all for joining us again. And we'll see you in 2 weeks, not next week, but on the 17th. And our topic on the 17th is, actually, I think it says Happy Trails. We're going to start digging into trip planning. And it's another one of the two-part series of trip planning stuff that'll be presented over the course of 2 different webinars. Yeah.
Great. Well, thanks for joining us, and hopefully we'll see you next time. Take care.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.